My true story, from Arizona. My son and his wife laughed at my cooking, called it poor people food. I cleaned the dishes, then claimed the land they ate on. Ugh, why is she even here? I thought we agreed to start easing her out. She smells like old potatoes and sadness. That was the first thing I heard when I stepped out of the guest room, if you could call it that. It was really just a cleaned-out storage corner in the garage, musty and cold, with boxes still stacked against the wall. They had not even bothered to plug in the space heater. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders and adjusted the tray in my hands. The chili was still warm, covered with foil, and clutched close to my chest like a baby. I had just returned home from the hospital 2 weeks ago. A minor stroke, they said. Nothing too serious, but serious enough to keep me from living alone for now. My son, Thomas, offered to take me in while I recovered. His wife, Kelsey, agreed, at least on paper. They made it sound generous. Noble, even. But the moment I arrived, I knew better. They cleared a corner of the garage, put an air mattress on the floor, and called it my room. No heating, no television, and no window, just a bedside table with a chipped lamp and an old floral blanket that still smelled faintly of mothballs. The bathroom I was supposed to use was technically the guest powder room, with no shower and a constantly leaking faucet. Meals were often leftovers, cold, dry, and microwaved without care. Once I was given a half-eaten sandwich still wrapped in a napkin from Tomas's office lunch. Today, though, was different. It was Thanksgiving. A full house, a long table stretched across the open-plan dining room, lined with expensive centerpieces and rented tableware. Kelsey's family had flown in from California. Her mother sat at the head of the table like she owned the place. The air smelled like rosemary, candles, and resentment. I had made my chili, my award-winning charcoal-grilled chili that once won a ribbon at the Arizona State Fair. It was spicy, smoky, with hand-roasted peppers and a secret blend of beans and beef I had perfected over decades. I had even served it at my husband Mark's memorial, and everyone had gone back for seconds. I had told Thomas I wanted to contribute something for dinner. He had said, distracted, "Sure, Mom, whatever you want." So I spent the morning in their kitchen while they were out, chopping, stirring, tasting. I kept the dish warm in the oven and waited for the right moment to bring it out. Now, holding it in trembling hands, I stood at the kitchen entrance, just beyond the dining room. And I heard Ivy's voice, sharp and gleeful behind her phone camera. "This is what Thanksgiving looks like when you're too stubborn to die." She was live streaming. I saw the little red light blinking. Her friend giggled off screen. Then came Kelsey's voice, soft but pointed, from the living room. "Be honest, this place was better before she moved in again. We had peace, privacy. Now we've got prune stew and guilt trips." There was a beat of laughter. Ivy turned the phone toward the dining table, panned it across the guests, then zoomed in on me, still standing there, holding the tray. I did not say a word. I walked forward, quietly, and placed the dish on the side table near the kitchen, beside the cranberry sauce and untouched Brussels sprouts. No one looked at it. No one asked what it was. I returned to the kitchen to wash my hands. That is when I heard Thomas's voice, low and casual, as he poured himself a glass of wine. "She won't last the winter. After that, we remodel. Maybe a wine cellar where her room is." Someone snorted. I think it was Kelsey's cousin. I picked up a dish from the sink. It was greasy from turkey fat, still warm. My hand shook a little from the weakness in my left side, residual from the stroke, but I held it firm. It was a plate from their new set, bone white with a gold rim. Funny thing was, I had bought them their first set of plates, used coupons for weeks. 3 years after Mark passed, I saved every penny from tutoring sessions, skipped meals, and even sold an old necklace to get them that housewarming gift. And now, I was wiping their dishes in silence while they planned to turn my space into a wine cellar. Nobody noticed me, nobody offered to help. I listened as the laughter grew louder in the next room. Ivy mimicked my slow walk, dragging her feet dramatically as her friends laughed. Kelsey mentioned something about retirement homes in Scottsdale, and someone else joked about putting Nana out to pasture. I stared down at the plate in my hand. The soap bubbles reflected the chandelier's light. My back ached, and I shifted my weight to the good leg. I should have been angry. I should have slammed the plate down, yelled, demanded respect. But I did none of that. I just kept washing, one dish after another, my hands moving slowly, rhythmically, like I had done all my life. They thought I was too old to fight, too weak to matter, too quiet to count. They had no idea. Not yet. I did not know what had happened until the next morning. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing over and over again on the folding table beside my makeshift bed. Messages, missed calls, strange numbers. At first I thought it might be another pharmacy reminder or some automated message from my doctor's office. But then I saw the first text. "Is this you in the video going around? You deserve so much better." I blinked. What video? I scrolled further, more messages poured in. Some were from old students I had not heard from in decades. Others were from names I did not recognize at all. And then, one message had a link. I tapped it. The video opened with Ivy's voice, laughing into the camera. "This is what Thanksgiving looks like when you're too stubborn to die." It showed me, hunched over the sink, washing plates one by one. My back was to the camera, but the slow, careful movements, the soft gray of my hair, the trembling of my hands, it was unmistakably me. In the background, you could hear the clink of wine glasses and Kelsey's voice dripping with sarcasm. "Be honest, this place was better before she moved in again. We had peace, privacy. Now we've got prune stew and guilt trips." Then Thomas's voice, clear as a bell. "She won't last the winter. After that we remodel, maybe a wine cellar where her room is." The video ended with Ivy turning the camera back to her own face, laughing with her friend. #Grandma's Last Supper. I sat still, my mouth dry, my hands frozen in my lap. I did not cry, I did not call out, I simply listened again. Watched again. Every word, every cruel laugh. Every second I had been too busy washing dishes to notice. The video had over 3 million views. The comments came like wildfire. "Jesus, this broke me. I don't even know her, but I'm crying. Look how she keeps scrubbing while they joke about burying her. She's not a ghost. She's their mother, their grandmother, and they treat her like a burden. Where do I send flowers to this woman? She deserves better." I sat there, stunned. People were defending me. Strangers were defending me. Some called it elder abuse, others called it psychological cruelty. A few had even tagged news stations and influencers. My name was not in the video, but my story was suddenly everywhere. I had become a symbol, not of strength, not yet, but of everything quiet women endure without complaint. I had become a mirror for every forgotten mother, every discarded grandmother, every woman who cooked, cleaned, stayed, and loved, only to be set aside when the music got loud. I did not ask for it, but it had begun. And for the first time in years, I felt something flicker in my chest. Not pain, not shame, but the beginning of being seen. I used to be someone they listened to. For 33 years, I taught English at a public high school just outside Tucson. My classroom smelled like chalk and old books, and I kept a tin of mints by the door for every student too shy to speak. I taught Romeo and Juliet, but also how to fill out a job application. I helped failing kids write their first essay worth a passing grade and stayed late grading papers while the janitor vacuumed around my feet. I loved it, every piece of it. Back then, my name meant something. Mrs. Martin, they called me, and sometimes Mom when a student had no one else to talk to. My husband Mark used to wait for me, even on the nights I came home past 8, arms full of red pens and lesson plans. He was a carpenter, gentle, honest, always with sawdust on his jeans. We built our little life, slowly, carefully, one paycheck at a time. We never had much, but we had enough. And we had love. Then, the cancer came. It started in his liver, spread to his lungs. He tried to be strong. He cracked jokes during chemo, called himself a walking science experiment. But I saw the pain. I saw it at 3 a.m. when he woke drenched in sweat, or the morning he could no longer button his own shirt. I fought the bills, begged insurance, clipped coupons, and sold the last piece of jewelry he ever gave me, my wedding ring, to pay the deductible on a drug that bought him 3 extra months. I do not regret it. He passed on a Tuesday, just after sunrise. I was holding his hand. He said, "Tell Tommy to take care of you." Thomas had just gotten married then. Kelsey had expensive tastes and a bright, hungry smile. They lived in Phoenix, where everything was newer and shinier than what Mark and I ever knew. I thought maybe, if I moved closer, I would still have a family. So I sold the house, packed the quilts Mark made, brought my cookbooks. I bought a modest mobile home 10 minutes from Thomas's subdivision. At first, he was kind. He came by to hang curtains, brought me leftover takeout, hugged me at the grocery store. One night, while setting up my old bookshelf, he looked at me and said, "Mom, I will take care of you from now on, like you took care of me." I remember it word for word. His voice is so sure, so gentle, I believed him. But time wore the shine off his promise. The visits grew shorter. The tone turned clipped. Kelsey stopped waving when I came by. My chili was too old school, my decor too cluttered. Invitations stopped. Holidays came without phone calls. And when I ended up in the hospital with a small stroke, it was the neighbor who found me, not Thomas. When I came home, he said, "You should stay with us for a bit, just to recover." I thought he meant it. I packed a suitcase. But what waited for me was not care. It was a storage room. No heat, a cot by the boiler. My meals were leftovers, cold or reheated badly. Still, I cooked. I offered my chili, my cornbread, the recipes that won me blue ribbons at the state fair. And they laughed. They laughed at what once made our home warm. They laughed at what once made me proud. The promise Thomas made, the one about taking care of me, it faded, along with the last real family dinner I can remember. After Mark died, I spent the first winter alone, listening to the clock tick too loudly in every room. I could not bear the silence, so I filled it with paperwork, insurance, estate transfers, tax declarations, everything Mark used to handle while I took care of the kitchen and the kids. That is when I realized something chilling. If I died tomorrow, everything we had built would go to Thomas. Not just because he was our only child, but because we had never questioned it. It had always seemed right, but what if it was not? What if the boy who once called me mommy as he ran in from the sprinklers had grown into a man who only saw me as a burden? I could not sleep that night. The next morning, I called someone I had not spoken to in nearly a decade, Nora Davidson. Once a shy teenager with a messy braid and a stutter, she had sat in my classroom on the third row, always scribbling stories in the margins of her composition notebook. She had become a lawyer now. I knew because I sent her a graduation card and she mailed back a thank you note, signed, "With love, from your favorite comma corrector." She picked up on the first ring. "Mrs. Martin?" Her voice was warm. "You all right?" "I need to talk about trust," I said. We met the next day over tea in her office, a tiny suite above an old bakery downtown. I told her everything. About the house, the stocks, the land in Sedona Mark and I bought for retirement but never used. About the way Thomas and Kelsey had treated me since I got sick. I did not cry. Nora cried for me. "I want a conditional trust," I said. "I want it to go to Thomas unless he breaks the spirit of care. I want that documented." She nodded. "You mean emotional abuse, neglect, humiliation?" "Yes," I said. "If I pass away after having been hurt like that, intentionally, then I want it rerouted." "To whom?" I slid a piece of paper across her desk. A name I had written months earlier. She read it aloud. "The Southwest Women's Recovery Scholarship. It is for women over 55. Alone, trying to start over." She looked up. "You want your life's work to help women who were forgotten?" "I want it to mean something," I said. We drafted the trust over several meetings. Nora was meticulous. She included clauses for abuse, exclusion, and emotional mistreatment. She outlined specific examples that would trigger the trust's redirection: being denied basic dignity, public humiliation by heirs, evidence of neglect while in medical recovery. She made me name a backup trustee. I chose her. By the time we were done, everything was airtight. $893,000, 0 cents in total, between my house, stocks, land, and savings. "If they care for you with love," Nora said. "Thomas inherits everything, but if they harm me, it all goes to women who need a second chance," she finished. I signed the papers. I kept a copy in a blue folder beneath my bed. No one else knew. Not Thomas, not Kelsey, not Ivy. They thought I was the quiet old woman washing their dishes. They had no idea the table they sat at might someday belong to someone they never met. The kitchen smelled of rosemary, garlic, and something faintly metallic. like shame. I stepped carefully through the swinging door, holding a linen towel in my hands. My chili had been sitting on the back counter, warming in a slow cooker marked with a yellow sticky note, Elena's, do not remove. But it was gone. I paused. I looked left, then right. That was when I saw him. A young man in a server's vest, sleeves rolled up, standing over the industrial trash bin with a ladle in one hand and my chili pot tilted in the other. Thick, dark red stew sloshed out in globs, landing with wet, final thuds in the black plastic bag below. "Excuse me," I managed. He jumped slightly, glancing over his shoulder. "Oh, sorry, ma'am," he said, still dumping. "Chef said this wasn't on the menu. It looked kinda depressing." The ladle scraped against the bottom. "Limon," her lapdog growled, and he gave it a final shake and turned back to the sink without another word. My feet would not move. My hands felt suddenly too empty, though I still held the towel. I stared at the trash bin. I could see the last spoonfuls of my chili. The same recipe that had once won the Arizona State Fair back in '92. The one I used to make for Mark every fall. The one I had spent the entire morning preparing, with slow-roasted ancho peppers and cumin toasted in a pan just like my grandmother taught me. The stew had turned cold now, a red and brown pile settling into the waste like it never mattered. I wanted to say something, to yell, to ask why no one told me, to demand they treat my food, my offering, with a shred of dignity. But I said nothing. I just stood there, towel still folded, staring into the bin. I still remember the way Mark used to hold my hands after dinner, his thumbs brushing over my knuckles, like he was memorizing the map of my years. Every night, after the dishes were done and the children were asleep, we would sit by the back porch with our coffee, his black, mine sweetened, and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes, we would just sit in silence. That was his favorite kind of love, he said, the kind that did not need proving, only presence. Mark was not a man of grand gestures, but he never forgot a birthday, never missed a parent-teacher night, never came home without kissing my forehead first. He was the kind of man who left notes in my recipe book, little scribbles like, add more cumin if it's cold out, or don't forget how proud I am of you. When he got sick, I tried to be strong for both of us, but he was the one who gave me strength. Even as the cancer hollowed him out, he smiled, called me his stubborn girl, said I was the reason he lasted as long as he did. I remember one night, near the end, when he could barely breathe, I was feeding him soup, and he looked at me and whispered, "You've given everything. Just promise me you won't let them forget who you are when I'm gone." He died with his hand in mine. I whispered that I would be okay, even when I wasn't sure I believed it. And I tried to be okay, I really did, but the house was so quiet without his laugh, without his footsteps echoing in the hallway. I started talking to the photograph on my nightstand. I kept making 2 cups of coffee out of habit, and I kept every note he ever wrote me tucked inside the chili recipe, like seasoning for strength. That night, after the others had retired to the living room to drink cider and scroll through their phones, I sat alone in the storage room they called my guest suite. The air was still cold, my feet ached. But I opened the drawer beside my cot and pulled out the old Sony recorder Mark used to keep on his nightstand. I pressed play. Static at first, then his voice, warm and scratchy, from a recording I had forgotten we made. "If they forget who you are," he said, voice low and certain, "remind them with your absence." I closed my eyes and let the sound of him settle in my chest. Then I opened the folder with my trust documents and began writing a new letter. Not to Thomas, not to Kelsey, to Nora. I added 3 photographs, the video still of Ivy's live stream, the chili in the trash, and my name missing from the Thanksgiving seating chart. Then I signed the bottom of the revised directive with steady hands, marked with red ink, subject to Clause 3.1, humiliation of matriarchal figure in recovery shall trigger immediate transfer of estate. I folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope. They had thrown my food away. They would not know what else they had just lost. I did not raise my voice. I did not slam a single door. I did the dishes. One by one, I wiped the gravy-streaked plates, the wine-stained glasses, the crystal flutes they only pulled out when Kelsey's family visited. My hands were slow but steady, even with the ache in my wrist, and the bruised pride in my chest. No one offered to help. From the dining room, laughter echoed, sharp, detached. Ivy tore wrapping paper with the eager flick of someone raised in abundance. She squealed. It's the skincare set I told you about, Kel. I smiled faintly from the kitchen. The dish towel was warm in my hands, still damp with dishwater. I folded it neatly. Then I walked over to the side table and placed a small box, wrapped in newspaper, my gift for Ivy. Inside, a vintage silver charm bracelet. Mark had given it to me on our 3rd Christmas. Ivy used to admire it when she was younger, used to trace the little sun and horseshoe charms with her pudgy fingers. I left no note, just the box. Back in the storage room, I sat on the edge of the cot and opened my laptop. The screen took a moment to flicker to life. My inbox showed one unread draft. Conditional trust, trigger letter. I clicked send. Subject, activation of clause 3.1, estate reallocation attachments, 1. Video still, Ivy livestream, 2. Audio clip, Thanksgiving dinner conversation, 3. Photo, discarded chili dish. Timestamp, to Nora Davidson, Davidson Legal Group message. Per our previous agreement and documentation, I am invoking Clause 3.1 for emotional mistreatment and public humiliation, as outlined in our Trust's core protections. Please proceed with the reallocation procedures and notify all relevant parties. With clarity, Alina L. Martin. I watched the progress bar until it disappeared. Then I closed the laptop and returned to the kitchen, where I wiped the last counter, refolded the dish towel, and took one last look around the room I had once been proud to cook in. No one saw me move. No one suspected anything at all. 2 hours later, the fire crackled in the living room hearth, and the family was deep in gift-giving rituals. Ivy was halfway through unwrapping a new tablet. Thomas was pouring bourbon. Kelsey had just leaned back and sighed. Well, we survived another Thanksgiving. That was when the door opened. Cold air swept through. Excuse me, a voice called out, professional, steady, unfamiliar. All heads turned. A woman in a navy blue blazer stepped inside, clipboard under her arm, briefcase in hand. Sorry to interrupt, she said calmly. Is Mrs. Elena Martin present? Kelsey raised an eyebrow. She's around, probably organizing potato peels or something. The woman did not flinch. My name is Nora Davidson. I'm an attorney with Davidson Legal Group. I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Martin to deliver official documentation regarding the Martin Family Trust. Thomas blinked. Wait, trust? Kelsey laughed. She owns a sofa and some canned peaches. Nora didn't smile. She placed the folder squarely on the coffee table, flipped it open, and began reading aloud. Due to repeated violations of emotional well-being clauses outlined in the Martin Conditional Estate Trust, specifically public humiliation, emotional neglect, and verbal degradation, the estate has now been legally redirected. Thomas sat up straighter. Redirected to who? Nora met his eyes. To 84 women across Arizona. The trust will fund scholarships, housing stipends, and legal aid for single women over the age of 55, effective immediately. Ivy's voice cracked. Wait, we don't get anything? Nora turned to her. You got a live stream? Thomas stood abruptly, the wooden chair legs screeching against the tile floor. His face was flushed, jaw clenched tight, and in one furious motion, he knocked the chair backward with a sharp crack. You're ruining the family legacy, he shouted, pointing at me as if I had just set fire to the walls of our home. I did not move. I looked at the same son who used to beg me for one more bedtime story. The boy who once cried in my arms when he failed his first spelling test. That boy was gone. In his place was a man whose voice trembled not from heartbreak, but from the shock of consequence. I looked at him calmly and said, You ruined that legacy the day you let them laugh at me with a camera in your hand. Silence fell. Not the thick kind, not the heavy pause of mourning, but the razor-thin silence of a room finally seeing itself. Kelsey's smile was gone. Her eyes darted between Nora's briefcase and the open folder still resting on the coffee table. This has to be a mistake, she murmured, almost to herself. She never said anything. She did. Nora interrupted gently. She filed the paperwork 3 years ago. I was there. She signed every page, with clear intent. Thomas's voice cracked now, no longer with fury but panic. Mom, come on. You don't have to do this. We're family. You remembered that word too late, I said. still seated, still calm. Family is not who forgets you when your hands shake. Family is not who hides you in a storage room while they toast themselves with the wine you bought. But we were just joking, Ivy suddenly burst out. It was just a live stream. It was funny. You filmed me like I was an exhibit, I said. While I stood washing the dishes you dirtied, you laughed. You called my food a joke. You whispered about remodeling my room before I was even gone. Kelsey's mouth opened, then closed. She tried to speak, but found nothing to say. Thomas finally sat, slumping, defeated. This can't be legal. There has to be something we can contest. Nora cleared her throat. You can file a grievance, but I'd advise you to read the fine print first. The clauses are airtight. Your mother's trust was set up to prevent exactly this kind of exploitation. You're taking everything from us, Kelsey hissed. No, I said gently. I am reclaiming everything I was willing to give until you proved you did not deserve it. I stood there. Slowly, my knees creaked but held. The room seemed smaller than before. You still have each other, I said, but you do not have my name, and you do not have my silence. No one spoke. The Christmas tree lights blinked quietly in the corner. A pine-scented candle flickered on the mantel, and the chair Thomas had broken lay sideways on the floor, splintered, hollow, irreparable, much like the legacy he spoke of. I turned toward the door. Behind me, Nora packed her folder, her heels clicking gently on the tile, and in that moment, with nothing but my dignity in my footsteps, I walked out of the house I once built, and left behind the people who never thought I would. I moved out the next morning, before anyone could stop me. I packed a single suitcase with my favorite cardigan, a framed photo of Mark and me on our wedding day, the silver locket he left me, and the little blue folder containing the trust documents. I drove alone, the desert sun rising behind me, painting the mountains gold. I did not go back. I did not look at the house again. I checked into the Canyon Vista retirement home, a facility I chose because it sat on a red rock hill overlooking Sedona. The air was crisp, the view peaceful, and the staff kindly but not overly familiar. My room was small but bright, with a window that framed a juniper tree and a sky that went on forever. No humiliation, no family drama, just quiet dignity and room to be myself. The first few days, I took long walks along the garden paths, greeting other residents. Some nodded, others smiled. One woman, misty-eyed, said, "I saw your story on the news. What you did, good on you." I nodded and kept walking, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't long before the papers and online outlets picked up the story. The Sedona Sun ran a headline, "Grandmother redistributes estate after being called poor people food." The Phoenix Tribune quoted me. I offered my best for the people I loved. When they spat on it, I reclaimed it for the people who wouldn't. I shook my head as I read it, surprised by the calm authority in those words. By midweek, the story had exploded. TikTok videos with captions like, "Grandma burned the brunch empire with legal fire" went viral. I watched one clip. A caricature of Kelsey's brunch shop suddenly denied funds, the screen flashing red, error, frozen. A crowd cheered an audio overlay. Beneath it, comments poured in, "She's a legend. That's how you serve justice." Older women are more powerful than they're given credit for. More than once I pressed pause and closed the app. I did not watch it all. Letters arrived, too, from local women in their 60s who told me they had been silenced for years. Widows, single mothers, immigrants, thanking me for being their voice. One woman in Yuma wrote, "Your story gave me courage to ask my son to treat me with respect." I did not respond. I simply folded the letters and kept them in a box by my dresser. I found peace in small routines, no bitter laughter, no mean looks. The silence here did not sting. It healed. Late one afternoon, Nora visited. She brought coffee and sat with me in the garden courtyard. "The trust disbursements begin next month," she said softly. "Eligible women are being notified. Some don't know yet what to think." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "Good," I said. "Let it mean something." That night I fell asleep to the wind rattling branches against my window and woke to a sunrise I could mold into hope. Weeks later, I received a formal invitation to speak at a women's leadership conference in Phoenix. They called it Second Acts, Reinvention after 50. I reread the letter at breakfast in the dining hall, in front of bored residents nibbling fruit salad. My heart fluttered like it hadn't in years. I did not know what I would say yet, but I knew why I would stand. Because once my heart was unused to being seen, once my silence protected others, and once my absence taught them what they lost. Now I would use my voice. For me, and for the women like me who felt invisible, until someone finally lit the match. 775 words into this next chapter. And I felt ready. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. It was handwritten in blue ink, shaky but strong, on floral stationery with roses in each corner. The return address read, Tucson, Arizona. No name, just the initials, R.M. Inside, the words spilled out like a quiet song. Dear Mrs. Martin, I watched your story. I saw the way they treated you. I saw how you never raised your voice, never begged for love that should have been freely given. And yet, you walked out with your head high and your name intact. I am 71. Last month, my daughter told me I was a burden. She said I was draining their joy, that my presence in the guest house was suffocating. I have not spoken since, not because I could not, but because I chose silence. Your story reminded me. Silence is not surrender. It is a weapon, and sometimes it is the only one we have left. Thank you for reminding me that dignity is a choice, that legacy is not built by children who forget, but by mothers who remember. With quiet strength, R.M. I read it twice. Then a third time, I did not cry. I placed the letter in the wooden box with the others, slid it gently beside the photograph of Mark, and sat quietly in the morning sun, warmed more by paper than the Arizona air. 2 weeks later, I received news from Nora. Thomas had hired an attorney to contest the trust. Kelsey had posted vague rants online about entitled elders with too much time and too little grace. Ivy had gone dark on social media, her once bubbling presence now eerily still, but the court documents were clear. Multiple counts of emotional neglect, supported by video and audio evidence, corroborated by a third-party psychologist who reviewed the live stream and the transcripts. The judge dismissed their claim in under an hour. Mrs. Elena Martin's decision stands, Nora wrote. It was over. Not with fireworks, not with shouting, just a gavel, a file folder, and the law on my side. Later, Nora sent me a final draft of the will, stamped and notarized. In the section labeled Family Beneficiaries, under the names of Thomas and Ivy, a single line had been added. I had asked for it. To the seat they never offered me, I leave them the silence they once forced upon me. No inheritance, no property, just silence. That was their legacy now. And I had finally made peace with mine. 1 year passed. The air was gentler now, the Arizona sun less punishing. The courtyard of Canyon Vista had bloomed with desert marigold and hummingbirds that darted like memories, brief, bright, and gone before you could blink. I sat beneath the patio awning with my usual morning tea, chamomile, 2 sugars. My fingers, a little more weathered, still curled around the cup with the steadiness of someone who had nothing left to prove. That was when Nora arrived, smiling in a way that said she carried something important. She handed me a folder, a simple manila envelope with my name written in block letters. I opened it slowly. Inside was a printout of a scholarship application. The header read, Desert Women Rising Foundation, Personal Essay Submission, Applicant Ivy Martin. I paused. Ivy, I read on. I grew up thinking my grandmother was a relic, an old woman with old food and older opinions. I thought she was stubborn, embarrassing, stuck in time. I laughed at her cooking, calling it poor people's food. I filmed her washing dishes like she was some sad punchline. Now, a year later, I think about her every time I turn on the stove. I wonder how she survived without bitterness, how she raised a son who forgot her, how she made something out of nothing and still gave it away. If I could talk to her again, I would not ask for a recipe. I would ask how she carried silence like armor, how she turned humiliation into grace, how she left us nothing but left us with everything we needed to learn. I am not proud of who I was, but I want to be proud of who I am becoming. And maybe this scholarship can help me get there. I stopped. I did not cry. I simply sat. A soft breeze brushed past, lifting the edges of the paper like breath. I looked at Nora, who only nodded. "She does not know," she said. "We keep all donors anonymous. It was part of the condition you set." I nodded back. "Good." I folded the paper, tucked it into the pocket of my sweater, and leaned back in the chair. My eyes wandered to the mountains, so old, so sure of themselves. I felt the warmth of the tea in my chest. "They laughed at my food," I whispered, not to anyone but the wind. "But they dined on my sacrifice, and now they'll stand where I once sat." I did not know if Ivy would receive the scholarship. The decision belonged to a committee I had never met. But in that moment, it did not matter. What mattered was this. Somewhere in Arizona, a young woman sat at a desk, writing with shame in one hand and hope in the other. She would never know that her grandmother read her apology and forgave her. Not out loud, but with a cup of tea, a silent prayer, and the peace of knowing that the land they ate on was never theirs to claim. It had always belonged to the woman they never truly saw until now. If this story reached you, if you felt the sting of a slammed door, the ache of being overlooked, or the quiet strength it takes to walk away without slamming anything at all, then you know what it means to be a woman who remembers. A mother who gave too much. A grandmother who was called too much until she wasn't there at all. Elena Martin's story is not fiction. It is not revenge. It is truth, wrapped in silence, carried for years, then released like breath after too long underwater. It is what happens when a woman stops waiting to be invited to the table and takes back the land beneath it instead. They mocked her food. They mocked her presence. But in the end, they learned she was not seasoning, she was the soil. And when she stood up, the house they built on her silence shook. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share it. If you've lived a version of this, say it. And if you've been quiet too long, stay with us. Because here, your voice matters. Your story matters. This is Grandma True Stories, where silence becomes strength, and memories don't stay buried. We speak not for pity, but for clarity. For all the grandmothers who endured, for the mothers who were forgotten, and for every woman who was once told she was too old to matter, we're here. And we're not done. So, if this story stirred something in you, subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Hit the bell, stay close, and come back each week for a new voice. A new memory, a new truth, told slowly, deeply, and without apology. Because revenge has no expiration date, and when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens.